And we're back to break down yet another childhood classic. Perhaps the best of all time, I'll leave that up to you, but Avatar: The Last Airbender is a joyous experience. Its adventures vast, always on to the next unique destination, where we'll get a glimpse into new slices of humanity, some thriving and many holding on to a delicate balance, from a remote island where a small female warrior class of non-benders can go unassailed by the ever-expanding Fire Nation, honing their stylized performative combat, a graceful dance of flips and fans, to a massive and impenetrable stronghold of stone, where the proud and unshakable Earth Nation stands their ground against the domineering will of fire. They lead a great society with mighty foot stomps into the ground, a rigid and direct power stance that projects their iron will. To the Fire Nation, they say, "Come and attack, we'll be a brick wall that holds firm against any invasion." To the wildly contrasting water villages, meek, defenseless little tribes with no fortress to speak of, who just pray nothing dangerous comes their way, too small for anyone to bother with them. Then in the north we see what a proud water tribe can be, a formidable society with powerful benders, large walled defenses but eloquent design, overlaying sophisticated engineering. We explore the large places, but don't neglect by any means the small, because it's how a spanning empire's oppression trickles into every crevice of a world that shows us what it's really like being here, what life is like for an ordinary person, not a heroically defiant army of stone soldiers, but the fisherman, the pirate, farmers. It's in remote locations the Fire Nation's unresisted heel digs in the deepest. A small village of earthbenders shamefully hide their natural gifts from Fire Nation handlers, their meager wages put in a stronghold by egregious taxation, where fear and conditioning turn neighbors against one another. In a Stockholm Syndrome self-policing scenario, the old man saved by earthbending reports his very saviors to the authorities. Their loved ones shipped away to prison ships for being who they are, earthbenders. Defenseless benders forced into fueling the great machine of their captors, sealing their own demise, a pattern we see continued by the inhabitants of the old air temple who secretly build machines of war for the Fire Nation. Then there's a small band of children hidden in the forest, seeking revenge against the nation that ruined their lives, and in search of that goal, fall into similarly barbaric methods, like killing a town of innocents to hurt their enemies, becoming what they hated in the process, and coming to see how people in this world live, from great cities to forest hidey holes, where in one hand building our understanding for the range of societal status, cultural diversity, tradition, economics, and in the other, we see just how intrusive, influential, far-reaching, and ever-present the Fire Nation, our core threat in the series, has become in Aang's absence. We build them up in our minds as a deeply rooted problem, while also seeing just how important the authority of the Avatar is. Aang ties all of these locations together. Where he goes, so follows chaos. But his purpose is to settle that and bring peace to every corner of the world, not just a few major cities. This vast exploration shows us how the world perceives the Avatar in just as fine of resolution. Sometimes people are excited and rejuvenated by his appearance. The idea of the Avatar experiences a resurgence, depicted best in Kyoshi Island, by the villagers carefully refurbishing their beaten statue of Kyoshi. Others feel let down, having prayed for so long that he would return one day, for that to never happen, and this went on for generations. People moved on from this old order, and did their best to hold on in the only ways they could. 100 years late, this Avatar Aang shows up, and he's a child, not ready for the role. There are demands on him that don't belong on the backs of children, but no one can spare him that courtesy, because his duty in the world is beyond anyone's personal needs, as his own teachers emphasize. Aang's undergone extreme arrested development. 100 years went by, but he lived none of them. As an Avatar, he's an unshapen clean slate, without the power to change the world. Urgency is forced into the stages of this journey by an unreasonable time limit, heightening the passive strain those burdens already place. Each destination this season is some mix of him rebuilding his tarnished reputation and cultivating the mind, body, and bending befitting of the Avatar. Small focused steps toward a completed ideal in each episode. That's the strong direction of the show, always applying itself toward the bigger picture. All of Aang's journeys are chances for him to prove himself. He's looked down at first by many because they just see a goofy kid with big claims, but he goes village by village defending people, showing them the error of their ways, inspiring them to take freedom back from their their oppressors, sacrificing himself for their safety, leaving it all out on the battlefield, spreading hope, restoring a symbol, what the Avatar is meant to be. He's not just beating up the Fire Nation, he's reviving faith from the ground up and teaching those who've given up that there's still a way back to this dream of balance between nations. At large scale, balance is something the Avatar must maintain among the powers of the world, both in the material world and the spiritual. But on the micro level, he needs to be a balanced person as well, which doesn't come free to such an underdeveloped person. He has certain heightened characteristics that came about from his upbringing, culture, and elemental affinity, but lacks a wide world of wisdom to see the full picture of things. He has the free spirit, adventurousness, and creativity of Air, which gets highlighted right away by the collision of lives when Aang and Katara first meet. Katara and her village have lost the idea of having fun, of enjoying life. And Katara's never left home before, as she says, making Aang a rejuvenating force to their culture. However, this doesn't deal with the reasons that fun had left them to begin with. Built from Aang's missing history is an empty cavern of understanding for the lives of modern societies, where Sokka says, "You can't fight firebenders with fun." This split in seriousness depicts the impact of war's conditioning on people by juxtaposing children who have and haven't lived through it. This naivety of Aang is slowly peeled away as he curiously experiences the new world, noting that he's never seen any war, though he soon would. By the way, if you're liking the video so far, I'd be oh so grateful if you'd hit like and subscribe so I can keep at it. Thank you very much. A large part of this developing insight on other nations would come from learning about the nature of bending elements. Aang's lack of bending diversity, beyond a lack of power, is an absence of understanding for the global picture of human nature, some sections of which hold tension with Aang's personality. We see in a later season how the mentality of earthbending clashes with air, and here the discipline required for proper firebending, to patiently attend one's breathing for hours. The element demands more maturity than Aang's had time to develop, a problem Zuko had shown us before, not having the patience for the basics under the careful pace of Iroh's teaching. Aang tends to slack off at training and lets his talent carry him to his detriment at the Northern Water Temple, where Katara, a lesser talent, gets ahead of him. But that carelessness doesn't pair well with true power. That power is dangerous. It can hurt you and those around you if not handled with care. For someone like Aang, who values others over himself, the importance of this personal development is heightened when his rushed bending burns his dear friend Katara, then flipped around in Aang's favor as he gained the wisdom and exploited it to defeat General Zhao at the end of the episode, with Zhao burning his own ships to the ground. Master Zhang has seen the path of a hasty firebender and knows their destiny. Aang lacked that overview and the self-control needed to tame fire. Beautifully, this conforms to the state and fate of the Fire Nation. Fire, if not given strict order and balance with the rest of nature, as Zhang says, will spread, destroying everything in its path, which is what the Fire Nation has been doing so well. He, as a defector from the Fire Nation, exists as the line between a coexisting nation and an authoritarian empire. Zhang has seen the path Aang's behavior leads to society, making Zhao this sort of exemplar for the flaws the Fire Nation of the time bear, and so he rightly heeds caution in providing Aang training. Avatar the series suggests the rulebook for averting this fate is built into the order of nature. The sun is the great example of Zhang's philosophy. It burns powerfully, but in complete balance with nature. This natural intelligence is what the Avatar uses to keep the world together, and in his absence, it fell apart. Bending, culture, nature, war, wisdom, they all join together to expand the depth of Avatar's story. Aang's training places some of these ideas into the palm of his hands, as he's meant to set fire to the leaf, but not allow the flame to spread past the bounds of the leaf's edges. An example that allows the abstract picture of Zhang's thinking to be contained in a tangible and engaging exercise for Aang's growth. Katara has a nice place in this also. We see that the natural counterbalance to fire's rage is the healing waters, which fits Katara's character quite well, as she's always been this caring source of emotional control for Aang when he's lost himself to pain and sorrow, and also becomes the last resistance against Zuko's enraged flames when Aang is defenseless in the spirit world. When Aang discovered Gyatso's body at the air temple, she was there to calm him down. She's able to right Aang's wrongs and save herself from carrying scars, what Zhang describes as a burning curse, carrying scars on his face as well, and a curse that gives way to Zuko's central plague, the scars he can never escape, that remind him and those around him every day of his shame. Scars that remind Zhang of the fine line between humanity and savagery that firebending brings to the forefront, the tightrope we must walk upon to keep power from running rampant and reducing us to careless monsters, the image he sees in his former student Zhao. But for the ruling Fire Nation, this reality is flipped on its head. The peaceful, modest, shaggy, robed firebender is the savage, someone who strayed from the glory and perceived supremacy of fire. As we've touched on, Aang through his journey picks up fragments of a completed avatar, and here he applies Zhang's wisdom at the end to take down the misguided bender without attacking once, without the aggression that defines the ruling nation, the opposite of a Fire Nation strategy. Aang woke up into this new world, needing redemption. He had no family, friends, or home, his mind unrefined. For this difficult world he's been thrusted into, his central resistance is the Fire Nation, with Zuko at the forefront. Zuko, an angry, violent, obsessed hunter, willing to lead his men to peril and burn cities to the ground to take down the hero, but in spite of this, manages to be even more sympathetic than Aang. Like Aang, he's seeking redemption from what happened when he was little, at no fault of his own, lacks family, friends, home, all of it. But Zuko's personality furthers his isolation. Unlike Aang, he doesn't manage to find friends. The importance of his journey comes at the cost of an ordinary life, which Aang manages to find some time for while becoming the Avatar. There's many slice of life sections this season, for Aang to get some semblance of a childhood. For Zuko though, it's day and night, through storms, chasing without rest. His home is gone, his family preys on his downfall, sister smiling at his lowest moment, when casted away for having a conscience, for caring about his own people, an innocence that seals his fate. He's a victim of the nation he was born to rule, one that often impedes him from reaching his goal, even trying to kill him. To be rejected by the closest people in your life is a pain that never fades. Your self-worth is crippled for life. He clings to the hope of returning to them, clawing towards his salvation in Aang, who manages to slip through his fingers every time. Aang holds on to happiness and freedom, but Zuko's miserable and dragged across the world by the chains of his unachievable goal. I'm not sure he smiles once the whole season, except for the flashback, which quietly conveys to us the drastic decay of mental health. His exterior is like a dry, jagged wall of rocks. His heart is layers hidden from the rest of the world, conditioned out of the picture by the crazed nation whose ideals he failed to live up to. There's but a single outlet for his more human side to survive, one source of familial connection, enough to keep him hanging on, a voice that guides him toward peace of mind and balance, a voice that tells him to relax, take a minute to enjoy the world, a break at the hot springs, a game of pai sho, a piece of normal life, the only normalcy he may ever know again, Iroh the only family that may ever receive him. As Zhao says, if his dad really wanted him back, he would have let him already. Finding the Avatar is a pipe dream generations have sought to no avail. Sending Zuko on this task is a way of torturing him further, running along the endless hamster wheel, expecting an end. Zuko's quiet evenings involve staring into the flame, having dazed daydreams about returning home. Iroh's teachings this season lightly nudged Zuko away from the edge, advising him to back away before he crossed into forbidden waters and got arrested for chasing the Avatar. Iroh's calm and cautious personality stands in inverse to Zuko, and managed to push Zuko gradually toward small moments of compassion and inner peace, the traits that were forced out of him years ago by the deeply traumatic lessons his father gave, scorned for caring about others, and banished for lacking unending aggression. When Zuko forgoes chasing the Avatar through the raging storm for the relief of his crew, it's a small win for his humanity. When Zuko finally listens to Iroh and rests at the end of the season, after such a long and punishing journey, it's a small win for his humanity. His obsession is so rooted and persistent that these tiny breakaways become profound moments. It's all this and a few others that gives Zuko such a range of viewer perspective. He's trying to do something really bad, but is as much a victim as anything else. Another component of this is his underdog status, being undercut by Zhao many times in the season. He has less men, ships, authority, and confidence behind him. Zuko's got one beat up smaller ship, with a crew that's barely hanging in there. Zhao at one point just takes his whole crew away. and is able to make massive sea barricades and launch an all-out invasion on the stronghold of the Water Nation, which complicates how we perceive Zuko's goal. We in part want him to beat Zhao, which alters the balance of what we're rooting for. I really appreciate how they take small steps to bridge him and Aang's side. It's not that he develops sentiment for Aang, he stays a strong enemy, but circumstance has it where he unavoidably becomes Aang's ally. As Zuko puts on his mask and alias to infiltrate his Fire Nation rivals to break Aang out of his cell, he becomes a greater disgrace to his nation, validating Zhao's insults. He aids the Fire Lord's greatest enemy for his personal gain, dishonoring himself, forming this hierarchy of values for Zuko's character. He talks often about restoring his honor, the thing his father made him fight for, the value Iroh uses to lighten Zuko's heart by affirming after his fight with Zhao, but through his actions we can understand where his values ultimately rest. Honor is just a means of winning approval when it comes down to it. Loyalty to a nation and acting honorably are put aside, as Zuko sinks into a deeper outcast by becoming someone who can't even reveal his face to his people, a criminal of the Fire Nation. When you've only known such status, like Zuko was born to, becoming ordinary is death. Worse yet, to be a person held in contempt. Zuko's madness fits perfectly with the difficulties he's presented. That's more or less the core of what I wanted to cover, but I'll add a few more things to flesh out what this season has going for it. This scene where Zuko calls Aang a master of evasive maneuvering is a great lighthearted way to show the different realities the two live in, where Aang acts haphazardly for fun, but Zuko is going to interpret that through his eyes, which are strictly serious. Also, this gets at the idea of Aang in fact being able to fight firebenders with fun, contrary to Sokka's claim. Just through his childish randomness, he becomes a special difficulty for the Fire Nation. The relationship between Sokka, Aang, and Katara has the right amount of bumpiness and resolution to create a compelling friendship that's earned and cherishable. Having people around that you have a lot of good times with is great, but it's once things have been bad and you've collectively worked things out and recover without it falling apart. That's what strength is in a relationship, or at least that's one idea. Even when someone like Jet comes in and tries to pull them apart, they manage to find their way back. When Aang's power gets out of hand and he hurts Katara, they find a way back. I like this scene where Katara and Sokka stand in awe of Aang's strength when he fights back the erupting volcano. She says, "Sometimes I forget what a powerful bender that kid is." This conveys that the identity Aang carries with him can get lost in the day-to-day adventures of just a kid, something Aang at times reduced himself to when he's unable to achieve his goal, like when the Fire Nation invasion of the Water Tribe was too much for him. The kid is the part of him that's not good enough, just like Zuko. This season gives time for Aang the boy to breathe, to discover himself in an ordinary sense, separate from this identity as a millennium-spanning reincarnation of powerful magicians. That part of him is allowed to fade into the background while he enjoys a childhood, causing the greater purpose of Aang to be forgotten temporarily by Katara. But that'll do it for now. Hope you enjoyed. This was Woski, and I'll see you later. Peace.